Okay, so we're going to look at some different types of visualization. And the important word here is signs. Designers spend a lot of time thinking about signs. Conceptually, this just means anything that indicates a real life object. So, in this example, we're going to look at a lot of different trees. When I say the word tree, that word is actually a sign for a real tree. It symbolizes the tree without actually being the tree. Only a real tree is a real tree. Everything else, a picture, a word, a description, a conversation about a tree, those are all just signs. They're symbols for the tree. They connect back to the tree. So let's look at some types of signs. First, the icon. An icon is usually a simple drawing. We think of icons in the technology world, icons for things on your desktop, stuff like that. But that simple, small drawing or simple visual representation. An index is an object that's close to what you're identifying, but isn't actually the object. So in this case, a leaf is an index object or an index sign for a tree, right? A tree has leaves, and because of their proximity in real life, we can mean tree, but simply by showing people leaves. A symbol is a total abstraction, so this symbol means first aid or hospital or doctor, even though there's no image related to that at all here. So all you see is a red plus sign or a red cross, and that indicates a hospital, doctor, medical something, and that's because it's been used that way. Basically, at a certain point in time, designers decided to create a symbol library, a number of symbols that would mean the same thing no matter what your language was and no matter where you were. And so those symbols are used across the world to indicate those same things. But symbols have no actual representation connection to the original sign. There's also a number of classifications for how these signs are created, and so we're going to look at those. They fall into generally three categories, but we're going to look at the specifics and then talk about the categories. So first is notation. You'll see it's a pretty simple drawing. It's sort of, it helps us to think about the object, but it isn't actually a realistic drawing of the object. The pictograph. A pictograph is usually blacked out like this, but doesn't have any real elements to it. It's sort of still in that notation form where it's kind of general lines without exact details. And a silhouette, where we've got the closest to a real representation of the edge, and it's blacked out so that the object isn't available. Linear, you'll see lots and lots of little lines used to create the composition, so all these little dashes end up making the tree. The contour, basically the outline of the tree. So wherever the tree ends and the rest of the world would be seen, you'll see a line. It doesn't show all the little leaves, it doesn't show all the interior of the tree. It's just the outside, so the contour line. Light and shadow, you see here what we're representing is where light and shadow would be in this object. So we start to see where the leaves would, or the billowing of the tree would curve down to the earth, or where the trunk of the tree would be dark. A naturalistic representation, you see this is really realistic, right? We've got starting to see leaves, and we're starting to see an actual tree trunk, and it looks almost real. That's a naturalistic interpretation. And expressionistic, this is where a little emotion gets imbued. It moves away from the real half step in terms of this tree sort of looks happy and fun as opposed to the last tree, which looked real. So it imbues some emotion into the representation. So generally they fall into three categories. The representational is very real. It tries to represent what the symbol connects to, so the actual real object in the world. An abstraction is really more of a personal interpretation, or just a sense of feeling or an emotion from the object. This departs enormously from the real. It's kind of at the other end. And in the middle is this non-objective. So we haven't actually drawn the object, but we've tried to create some simple lines that connote the feeling of the object, or that communicate something about the feeling of the object. As a designer, you can take a variety of different approaches to a design piece, and those approaches all have meaning and feeling, and they actually have a history and a context. And it's important to have some ideas about that when you embark on a project. So if you're going to decide that a project is going to be really homey and personal and feel handmade, you want to understand what that means and the historical context for that, and how it can affect the way it's going to be read. But just to give you some ideas of some possible approaches. Retro, right, so kind of a throwback look. Psychedelic, where it's a departure from the real and sort of funky. Not funky, but otherworldly. Funk is probably more funky, where the object itself loses its connection to a kind of normal space. Childlike, right? It looks like children have drawn this, or looks playful and youthful. Primitive, a real simple kind of connecting to original or basic lines, can look typewriter-ish, so pre-computer kind of look. Grunge is really popular right now. It's sort of degraded in a way. It looks hastily done, or it looks dirty, but it's very hip right now. Surreal, so surreal is another way to depart from the real. Psychedelic and surreal would be close, but there are some subtle differences, and how you interpret those differences is important. High tech, so very hard edge, very technical, very technology connected. Homemade, right? It looks like somebody could have actually drawn this. Obviously, that's not true. We're using a typeface here, but feeling like it's authentic and organic, feeling like it's made by a person. New wave, so it's sort of new wave can indicate a music style that's a little hippie gone yuppie, but so new wave has this that kind of feel. And futuristic isn't necessarily technical, although they can be connected. You see, futuristic here is really soft-edged, but it's like imagining a future where we need fewer lines to communicate letters. So it's slightly different but sort of connected.